Good morning and welcome to Talking Point here on WESN, the content capital. I am Keaton Shah. I am in studio this morning and I have the privilege of opening the show as my co-host and colleague Mr. Sean Michael Small has done for the last few days. He is alongside me this morning, Sean Michael Small, but we're also joined, we're privileged to have in our presence the former president of the Senate, Timothy Hamel-Smith, and a patriot, as I like to call him, an activist and a commentator. Yes, I'm looking at you, Mr. Alvarez. Good morning, sir. Good morning, sirs.
Good morning, Keaton. Thanks for having us.
Well, it's certainly a pleasure for us to be here for this conversation. I'm totally looking forward to it. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Keaton.
The white elephant in the room, as you like to put it. Oh, we'll get into that a bit later.
I'm not entirely sure what you're referencing this time.
We're referencing last week's Wednesday's, celebration.
Oh.
But since we're out of that mood, Mr. Alvarez, who was not with us on Monday, Mr. Hamel-Smith was, as we continue our conversation surrounding budget for fiscal year 2022-2023, this topic has been ignored for the most part by most commentators if you've been following over the last week, and that is corruption. And sure, it's a topic that we have dived into many a times here on the program, but whilst there are some positives out of the budget, there are also negatives that go with it. And of course, the issue of corruption, well, once more, a society that is plagued by corruption and is falling apart, well, we're not able to solve that as yet. So I'll start off with Mr. Alvarez, seeing that you were not with us on Monday, sir. Your general thoughts on, let me not be specific to the budget, but to where Trinidad and Tobago is right now as a country and as a society, and where do you see us heading?
Well, a good indicator, good morning Trinidad and Tobago, a good indicator for where we are and where we're going is a budget. So you look at the 2022-2023 budget, and you get a sense of going nowhere, a sense of hopelessness. You see, Keaton, the future of your country resides with our young people and the development potential for that country. And if you look at this budget, there's absolutely nothing that encourages our doctors or lawyers or engineers or architects to find gainful employment in Trinidad and Tobago, unless you're planning to work in a government ministry and wait 5 years or so to be appointed. You tell me, if you're an engineer, where's the next big large-scale engineering project? Mm-hmm. If you're an architect, where is the next building that you have to put up and so on? So what has happened is that a lot of our young people are leaving the country, and there's a massive brain drain, and the reason for all of that, as indicated in the budget, is an absence of planning, an absence of vision. Where are you looking forward to Trinidad and Tobago being 5 years from now, 10 years from now? That's the question. You can't tell me there's one thing here. There's nothing about roads and road development and new roads and so on. There's nothing about planning for your cities or your townships and so on. There's nothing, very few, almost zero about tourism as an alternative to the oil and gas dependency that we have. There's nothing about feeding ourselves in the long term and what crops we're going to target and what lands we're going to target in terms of agriculture, in terms of how we feed ourselves. What you see is a lot of keeping you dependent on the state. And saying we'll increase some grants here, we'll give you some, and the government economic initiative is to say, listen, if I reduce taxes from 35% to 30%, it will encourage the oil industry, the oil companies to invest more. And that's your vision. So there's nothing for the average citizen to sit down and say, well, you know what? I'm excited because tomorrow is going to be better because this is the plan of where we're going to be, and that there's no planning.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Hamel-Smith, what Mr. Alvarez has pointed out to me is a lack of investment in Trinidad and Tobago by Trinidad and Tobago. Now, we've utilized our resources over the years, our natural resources, and basically in terms of revenue, we've really utilized that for revenue. But we have not necessarily utilized that revenue. That is essentially the reason for this big brain drain that we're seeing, because I agree with you, Mr. Alvarez. I can speak a lot for young people who see no future in Trinidad and Tobago and are looking to migrate, even if the cost of living is higher, they're still looking at that opportunity because there is opportunity.
Well, I mean, I think Steve really hit home when he says, look, all the government is focusing on is oil and gas. Let's build that up, even though it's a resource that is diminishing. Let's just build up that money because that's where we're going to get the major revenues from. And nobody's saying they shouldn't have oil and gas. But think of the mentality behind that. Is they're really saying all the revenues we earn there, we can now, the state can now employ everybody. The state can deliver largesse out there. And of course, therefore, they have to vote for us. This is about getting votes and winning elections and having power as opposed to developing a country. So you get these resources, and it's the one thing that costs in Trinidad and Tobago, which has damaged the country, the psyche of the country, if you like. Because it's almost as if you want everybody to work for the government. Now, if you had no more oil and gas left, and everybody's working for the government, where's the government getting the revenue for medical, for roads, for the justice system, whatever? You derive your income, the revenue from the state, based on profits being made. So right now the profits are being made by the oil and gas, so we get huge amount of revenues. But there will come a day when that so diminishes, the revenues drop to zero. And then everybody's working for the state. And that doesn't earn the state any money. We're just heading down a valley, of nowhere. Instead of trying to develop the country, our focus is simply developing revenues out of oil and gas.
Well, let me pose a controversial question that you may or may not want to answer or find difficulty answering. Because when you look at it in hindsight, it seems as though, yes, the government is seeing the price of oil and they're running after oil and gas to try and get more revenue. But they were on that train before the war in Ukraine. They were on that train before the post-pandemic period was slowly driving energy demand up. It seems as though all throughout 2018, 2017, no matter how bad it went, they had no alternative plan. They were putting all of the dice, all of the eggs into the energy basket. So I have to ask, I understand that as a cynic, it's about politics and power, and now we could see in hindsight, due to an unforeseen event, it looks as though, yes, this is achievable now, but back then, back before $90-something a barrel and $110 a barrel, it seemed as though they were just stubborn and ran out of ideas when we were calling for diversity then. So is it that this is the political machinations of these, evil overlords that have a grand strategy, or is it just that they're stubborn and they don't really have an alternative path? Because I would argue for all of the other industries, they seem to not really know what they're doing. That's why tourism and agriculture are always touted, but the projects or the things that they try to implement or even just suggest seem to be nonsensical even.
Well, I tell you something. One of the things that business people would testify to is that you get the feeling in Trinidad and Tobago that the government is anti-business. You don't, if you are seeking, one of the most difficult things is just to get access to land, to manufacturing space and so on like that. And then there's so much bureaucracy. Just to get basic services in terms of water and electricity and so on for large manufacturing plants, it's never easy. And this is where the government should be investing. The least amount of government you have, the better for your country. But I want to come back to that point you talk about in terms of oil and gas. Look at what happened prior to the war in Ukraine. The government solution to our economic crisis was to borrow money. And they were borrowing money from left, right, and center and telling you, because of our rating, we're getting these loans at reduced rates. And nobody was talking about, okay, when I get these loans at these reduced rates, how am I going to pay these loans?
Well, I know one guy who was asking that question for months. I know one guy.
Yeah.
But, we've seen what that sort of thinking did in the UK, where the current policy is to cut taxes through financing via loans, and the panic, it reached a point where it might have been a legitimate strategy, but because it seems so unorthodox, the panic from the private sector and financial institutions is just looking to collapse the country. Are we ever going to reach that point where private institutions and our financial sector is just going to look at the budget of the day and say, what's going on? Because right now, the Energy Chamber and some of the other chambers said, oh yeah, this is great.
Well, gentlemen, I'll be very honest with you. I was just rather surprised at the response put forward by the majority of chambers as to their satisfaction with the budget. I don't know if they're seeing something that I'm not seeing, or if it is that they have no choice but to express that for the sake of them continuing their business and probably their business relationships with the government.
Yeah. Well, Keaton, sorry, I thought you were
I was going to say, there's no reason why you shouldn't borrow, I understand that, provided you take those resources and put it into productive center to build your country, because then that brings more revenue in. But if you just do it for the purpose of, giving grants, then there's no return. So you can't go on that cycle forever, because soon enough you won't be able to repay your debt. When you can't repay your debt, then you're bankrupt. That's what you call bankrupt. Because you can't borrow any longer, and you can't dig yourself out of the hole by digging another hole, which is what borrowing is. And they don't use it for the productive center to grow your country, and therefore there comes a debt trap that you put yourself into.
And we have no idea what we're using as collateral for these loans anyway.
Well, let's there's a reason why these manufacturing companies and these trade organizations seem to be happy with the budget, because we've had in Trinidad and Tobago the death of the middle class. So you have an upper class who have access to foreign exchange. So they want to keep that access to foreign exchange, because you and I, if you wanted to go to Miami tomorrow and so on, the bank would tell you, I think they give you like $50 or $500 if you know somebody in the bank, and it's become that's a crunch just for foreign exchange for vacation. But when you talk about you need 100,000 US to bring in goods and services and so on, you have to have some degree of contact and so on. And those people have that contact. They access that money all the time. And so you have an upper class who manufactures nothing. They're not in agriculture. They're not in tourism. They're not in creating employment for the local population. So what they do is that they buy goods abroad, put a huge markup on it, and they are very comfortable with this lifestyle. They don't care about tomorrow, Keaton, because if today or tomorrow things fall apart, they just jump to their apartments abroad.
Yes.
And they leave the country. So those people are very, very happy. And now you have a situation, what Tim is alluding to, is that when you have all these people working for the state, what do you think you have when you have these people working for the state? You no longer have a middle class. Long ago, a policeman and somebody working in the government sector and so on could have afforded a house. They could have made the down payment. That's your middle class. Now, the average salary in the public sector is between $4,000 and $7,000 a month. And a decent mortgage is somewhere around $7,000 to $12,000 a month. So you've killed the middle class. And as long as you continue working for government, you're really no longer a middle class citizen. You are a poor class citizen. So imagine you're going to school and then university, and after you graduate, you cannot afford a mortgage to build a family. That's the debt of the middle class. But it means that once you become dependent on government now, I have a vote bank. And that's what Tim was talking about. It's all the political intentions. Has absolutely nothing to do with
perhaps you want to go to socialism and we'll go like Venezuela, as it were. Because it can't succeed. You build nothing. All you have is the resources that government get out of oil and gas or whatever, and the danger is the rest of your country goes.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of already are looking like Venezuela. We moved everything to energy. We left behind every other sector, and when for whatever reason energy implodes, economy
it's
stops.
one of the things that worries me. I said, there's so many of our citizens that drive every day from Port of Spain to San Fernando. And they go down that Sir Solomon Hochoy Highway. On the right, on the left, you look on both sides, and all you see is abandoned land. This land was once sugarcane plantation. So now that land can be pasture for livestock. That land it's a grass, sugarcane was a grass, so corn is a grass, that can all be with corn. But you simply leave it alone to be bush. And we as a country, we're driving through that and we're okay with that because we have a little bit of money from oil and gas that can make you go to the Hilo and not Hilo, the Massey stores and whatever these other supermarkets are. And we have lots of supermarkets open all over the place now, eh? But every time you go now, you're buying foreign food. So the average kid breakfast is cornflakes instead of some good salad roti and some talkery from all the different things that we have, because we don't have that anymore.
Well, Mr. Alvarez, Mr. Hamel-Smith, Sean, I am enjoying this conversation, especially how we've now opened that death of the middle class topic, which I think there's a sense of denial that the middle class has disappeared. And for whatever reason, I'm not entirely sure, but to me, every time I have a conversation, people are saying, no, don't worry, the middle class is still there. You just can't see them, but they're still there. And I'm like, show me. But gentlemen, we're going to have to pause for now. When we come back, I'd like to continue with that topic as we continue with that mindset, that psyche of which you spoke of a dependency on the state, which in my opinion is deliberate. So we'll be right back after this on Talking Point.
Delivered nationwide. Kiss enriched bread.
Fill your day with love. Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website, www.fanzonett.com, for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website, fanzonett.com, to make your purchase today.
With society plagued by a host of issues, with debates surrounding our urgent concerns falling short, with questions of our future not always being answered.
The conversation continues. Join me, Kemuel Pascal, as the voice of the youth comes to life. We will confront the controversial topics of today's world to gain answers that are key for a better tomorrow. One and One with me, Kemuel Pascal. Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to Talking Point. Sean, Michael Small and myself were joined by Mr. Steve Alvarez and Mr. Timothy Hamill-Smith this morning. Thoroughly enjoying the conversation thus far because it speaks to reality of which I believe that people are very much shy of and hiding from. And it needs to have more conversations out there in order to truly understand the position that we're in as a nation and where we're heading, and hopefully spark some level of hope and inspiration for change. But gentlemen, you all spoke of the death of the middle class. Very, very important, because what does it mean? You have an upper class, an elitist system which has access to all resources and would not face difficulties such as the ever-increasing lower class is facing. But with that growing lower class, that dependency upon the state that you all have spoken of, is that, maybe you all have answered this question, but for the viewer, is it obvious? Is it that it's deliberate that the state is creating a dependency upon itself, whether or not it could finance it, but it's creating it upon itself because that is now part of our political system? Is that the case?
Yeah, what you've created is a patronage society. To get anything done, you have to know somebody who knows somebody who gets, and probably along the way, of course, you have to grease somebody's palm.
Well, more so now, Mr. Hamill-Smith, is not if you know somebody, as if they know you.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to know somebody who knows somebody, because that somebody else knows them.
Yeah.
If they don't know you. And that's a death knell of a country, if you create a patronage society, because corruption obviously runs everything down. If you're there is no country that has been successful built on patronage or corruption. The very first thing, Lee Kuan Yew would tell you this, that two essential things if you're going to have a successful country. It doesn't make you successful, but you cannot become successful if corruption underpins it, and then you have to create a culture of productivity, discipline, and people look to Singapore and say, well, that's how they started, that's how they benefit. That's not how they started. They were a horrible little port town of sailors, absolutely
no
without
natural
culture.
resources. Yeah.
But look back at what Eric Williams started with and the intention. If you look back at when the first election was done, it was won on the basis that we were against corruption. The PNM said corruption is what we have to eliminate. There must be zero tolerance. They may not have used that language, but that's what they were saying, zero tolerance for it. And it's on that basis they won. He understood that no country can develop which is underpinned by corruption. The other thing he did, of course, is say, discipline, production, tolerance were our watchwords. Education was important. He focused on those things. Unfortunately, it didn't carry through. And corruption soon enough became endemic to the country. And when that happens, it is hard to go back. Somebody has to intervene. And unless you cut that corruption out, you could have the best budget. You could have had all the development plans that we say should really be put in place. But corruption would undermine your ability to succeed.
Well, Mr. Alvarez, let me just follow up with that, because we're looking at what might be a cycle. That's what it seems to me, because you were alluding to this with the death of the middle class, and you're pointing out that even in the public sector, they're no longer able to afford certain things. But yet, we always hear or we see state entities being basically turned into jobs programs. You know, they have enough employees to do the work, but then they have this extra that comes from who knows where, right? That the unions don't want to get rid of. We have things like CPEP and URP. Their utility to the country at times, not always, but at times at least is questionable. So as more and more people, you know, the middle class is shrinking, they need jobs, people need jobs, so we just put them in these situations that now they are indebted to us to have these jobs that isn't necessarily going to get them out of poverty, so they stayed more indebted to us. Meanwhile, the private sector doesn't really, the labor market is being affected, so now we have problems with productivity because there's an imbalance there. Do we just need some big shot in the arm and some Hellcat to just cut through all of the noise, or somehow will incremental change be able to get us out of this?
Well, Keith's earlier talked about the population. Are they aware of what's happening? But it's very clear. In the budget, for example, they started by saying that the GDP from 2020 to 2022 grew by 34%. 34% from 142 billion to 190 billion. So you're saying that big and bold that hey, our economic situation has improved, and let me tell you, 34% is a tremendous amount to grow by.
Yes, yeah.
But then on the other hand, you're saying, but you know, despite this growth, all we can offer the population, the same people that you're employing, is a 4%. And why? Because we don't have the money. But we just talked about 34% growth, 24% more money than you anticipated. And now you're saying, all I can offer you is 4%. Well, that's a deliberate effort. And it's right in your face. The figures are there in the budget. But that's a deliberate effort to keep you where you are.
I mean, it's nominal GDP. So to what extent, now, he may not have used the terms as accurately as he was supposed to. So to what extent is this growth inflation? Yeah, there's more dollars there,
yeah,
but the value might just not be there. But the problem is, I think your point, it goes back to we've been talking about this, messaging. You know, they tell us things are good, but we can't do things because things are bad.
Yeah.
But don't panic because things are good.
But actually,
and which one is real?
But the point that you just made there, Mr. Alvarez, I think ties back into the very last statement you made, Mr. Hammersmith, where corruption undermines your ability to succeed. That being said, gentlemen, I am still rather confused because you made a very good point as it relates to nominal GDP. That's tremendous growth. The IMF has stated that Guyana is going to grow by, I think, by 57.6%. You know, keep that in mind. And by the way, if you see what's taking place in Guyana, you see where the money is being invested. You can actually see it. This is why I am confused, and I think this is why many of the citizens are confused, because even though the reasons behind it may be clear in terms of white-collar crime, maybe even red-collar crime, why is it there's been a failure by the state to deal with a situation, yet somehow when it comes to these difficult decisions, there's always a solution, there's always an answer, there's always something positive. Yet the results always end up being the same, if not worse.
Well, I think it might sound very pessimistic, but it might be more realistic though. I think that the state wants to keep things as they are. They want to keep you in a sense of dependence and want to keep you in a sense of despair. Because there's absolutely nothing that I could look at to show growth and development in terms, especially for the middle class. I'll give you an example. The minister talked about security and crime and so on, which is, you can't have a developed country and a developing country if investors are afraid to invest there because of crime. You can't build your family and bring your kids to school. I wrote an article about a young girl walking on the side of the road with her dog, and I was afraid for her because of our crime situation. Yet, in the budget, the only response that they had to crime was that, we're going to have some more technological advancement in the Ministry of National Security. And in that same budget, they're saying to people who are protecting themselves from bandits and burglars and so on, You are a legitimate holder of a firearm right now. And you know what? We're going to increase that,
Yes.
that fine so that so it becomes almost prohibitive. It's very difficult for you to even protect your own self at home because now you have to be able to find extra money to pay for your firearm user's permit. And of course, heaven help you if you are one of those persons who run in a security firm. It's unbelievable. You just had this big hold up in Pennywise, and these people didn't come out with no 9mm guns. They came out with AR-15s and so on and shoot up a car. But now they're telling the security companies, the people who have to respond to them with AR-15s as well, that if you want an AR-15, there's a $5,000 fee or something like that to
Annually,
have. Yeah. So in other words, it's anybody looking at this would say, wait a minute, this is a pro-bandit government.
But it's worse than that. When you talk about corruption, what they've done is dismantled all our independent institutions. So if you dismantle your independent institutions, you provide better for corruption to flourish.
Yeah.
So if they have one business that's flourishing, is corruption. So look at what they've done with the procurement. You dismantle the process to pretend that you have, because you don't want to face the public and say, no, we're not going to have good procurement. And procurement is what gets you value for money. But if you don't have procurement, well, it's friends, family, and followers who get the benefit of contracts. But they dismantled the civil service as well. Right? This is years ago they did that. I mean, at the time they got a sideline people like Doddridge Allain and Frank Rampersad, who were pivotal to building the, and then thereafter, of course, when you do that to public servants in the public and you blame them because they've been innovative, dynamic, that's the kind of public service you want. They then, the public service since then adopted a CYA model of civil service. Cover your ass, because the politician's going to take care of it. That's what has happened since, the 70s. So you hollow out the civil service. You need party financing legislation because we know that's the opening to more corruption and handing out of contracts to your financiers. We need an independent central bank, and all they're doing is making the central bank and the Minister of Finance, more, the central bank being more dependent on the Minister of Finance.
Which is absolutely wrong.
Look what happens in the Auditor General. The Auditor General is there to look after the finances, and they give no resources. You hear people come in and say, well, it's 10 years since we had our finances drawn up. What are you doing? You are creating. The government is an enabler of corruption, having dismantled every... Look at the EADB, the Economic and Advisory Commission that was headed by Terence Farrell. You scuttle it. You don't scuttle it formally, but you so undermine it that Mr. Farrell tenders his resignation. He says, I'm wasting my time. If all you do is take my proposal and put it in the waste paper bin, then I might as well get out. And every independent institution, and if you look around nations around the world, I am saying to you earlier that if you have corruption, and if you don't have a value system behind your country, you can't build a country. But those are the wherewithal, without which you can't build. What do you need to actually build is independent institutions, and we've taken all of them away.
Well, back to your point on crime, with regards to the Police Service Commission and that whole situation with the selecting the police commissioner. It's been over a year. Do we have a police commissioner yet?
We're due to have one by the end of the year.
Okay, so maybe if we hold our breath, we might survive.
I wouldn't hold your breath.
Yeah, I know. So, but you made a point with regards to they were going to get new technology for crime fighting, and it made me think. Well, technology. We've spoken about this digitization. They had a whole retreat in Tobago where that seemed to be the main thing that they were addressing. They have a whole new ministry for digitization. Corruption. What helps deal with corruption? Just simple things like proper paper trail.
Yeah.
And a digital paper trail is more robust, it's easier to access, you know, you don't have to go in the records room in TSTT and then it might light on fire by accident for some strange reason. Mr. Alvarez.
Which happened at
WASA. Exactly. WASA, sorry, it was WASA. So is it that now, because there's a part of me that thinks when we heard about digitization, we budgets. Minister uses a lot of buzzwords, but I was under the distinct impression that he himself does not necessarily understand what digital technology really, like I get he probably could turn on a computer, I'm not saying that he's inept, but to really now say what we're going to do for a country, to get the public service, to get crime fighting, I didn't really get that sense. Well, is it that, because y'all, I know we have corruption, but to me, I just keep coming back to the point where I don't know if our politicians have the proficiency that's needed in a wider variety of topics beyond just, well, this is what we did to win elections last time.
Proficiency, do you have the desire?
Well, that's I want to deal with two things real quickly. You talked about the understanding digitization. They don't. A perfect example of that is when you come into the country. You have a machine-readable passport. So when that immigration officer slides it, saying everything comes up on the screen, and they say, yeah. You know what she does? She looks at the screen and she looks at the piece of paper that you give to her. And she ticks, and then stamp it. You don't need the paper. Because all she had to do is look at the screen and say, yeah, everything is okay with you. But they still don't trust digitization. It's right there, you know, it's right available.
Sabotage the digital. Because you understand, if you made everything digital, then I might lose my job.
Well,
and I don't have a chance to interface with the public and put out my hand to get
I think that's the key, because we kind of underestimate those officers. It's their judgment that allows them, are you going to enter easily or not? I faced something similar where eventually I ended up getting a set of runaround with I won't give all the details, it'll take too long. But the long and short is, I got back to the point where when I landed in Piarco, if she just gave me the stamp that I ended up with after a couple of months, I wouldn't have to do all this run around.
No, but if you had sort of put something on,
I don't even know if they were asking. Maybe.
Alvarez,
and that's why they want to interface with you.
I know you have a second point to make. I'm going to ask you to just pause on it, because we do have to take a quick break here on the program. When we come back, we'll come back to your point, but then I have a question to ask both of you gentlemen, which might seem very easy on the surface, but there's a truer meaning to it, and I'll get back to that right after this. We'll be right back on Talking Point.
Come travel with us as we explore Diwali across the globe. Diwali is celebrated in many countries worldwide, but do you know the traditions and practices of each nation? From Guyana to Australia, WESN presents Diwali Passport, October 3rd to October 23rd, with replays on October 24th. It's Diwali Passport, a WESN exclusive.
The continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you, what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through? Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is it no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Welcome back to Talking Point. Now, before I ask my question to both Mr. Hamel-Smith and Mr. Alvarez, I think you had one more point that you wanted to make, sir.
Yes, the other point I wanted to make is very clear. Tim spoke about Singapore, but the leaders in Singapore, I think there was a little clip recently that was on social media, where they sat before and said, listen, we have a vision for Singapore and this is where we want to go. And the whole vision was making the country, putting the country first, making Singapore what it is today. What you have in Trinidad and Tobago is an absence of real patriotism. There's nobody sitting down and saying, let me plan where the next city is going to be, where the next road is going to be, what is the sort of industry that we want to see coming up. There's a total absence of planning, as indicated in the budget. Absolutely nothing in terms of you can sit down and say this is the vision for the next 10, 15, 20 years. But that's how Singapore started, with a vision where we want to be. And they looked at what were the constraints to that development. I said, listen, the constraints would have been corruption, the constraints would have been poor governance. And another point that they made was that we needed people to be employed based on merit. And those things, once you got...
to pay them well.
Yes. Once you did that, you could have built a nation. But I think that there's a fear. There's a fear, Keaton, of people, like young people like you and my good friend here. There's a fear of you guys becoming rich, becoming able to buy a house and travel and all that kind of stuff.
Them empower them.
Yes, because if you did that, you can now determine, I am voting based on competence and based on a vision for tomorrow and so on. But so they don't want that. It must be, I'm voting so that so I can survive, so I can get a little house, so I can get something. And when they call and say, listen, I need 5 and 10 and 15 maxi taxis to show up, you have to show up, because if you don't show up, you could lose your job.
I think, Mr. Alvarez, you've essentially answered the question that I was going to ask both of you all. Is it that lack of vision for Trinidad and Tobago? Is it that the greed for power and that selfishness for money, that wanting and desire of money, that has led to the death of patriotism, the death of a love for TNT, which we're now seeing the result of? That was going to be my question, and I think you've answered it. So to essentially segue, who do we blame? Is it a lack of vision, a lack of patriotism by those in power and authority? Or is it a lack of vision, or a lack of patriotism by the citizenry, who, even though they can open a newspaper on a daily basis and become informed as to what is happening, they may not necessarily be educated about the situation or willing to educate themselves of the situation? Is it that they've fallen into that cycle of brainwashing and they are to blame, or is it a combination of both?
I don't think it has anything to do with the citizens. I think it has to do with the leadership that's available. I'll give you an example. The average citizen would love to see a developed country. They would love to come home in the evening and have safe communities and so on. But you have to look at what has been offered to them. You've been offered the PNM, which has no vision, the UNC, who everyone is afraid of because of the corruption allegations that you have tied to that party. And then you have a plethora of young new parties where people are talking about, I will fix it. And the next one, I am the greatest, and I am this thing. And so you're not seeing anything that you can identify in. You have to identify with a party and a vision and a hope where you can participate. I think there's hope for tomorrow. I think that tomorrow you will see, and I promise you, Keaton, within the next few months, you will see emerging in Trinidad and Tobago a party that offers hope to Trinidad and Tobago. That where you have intelligent people coming together and saying, listen, you can participate in rebuilding our country. We can't build a country with one man saying, I can fix everything, or one man thinking that he is some superhero. You have to build a country with people from every race, every creed, every class, every community coming together with a vision, a shared vision, but building a better nation.
Mr. Alvarez, that sounds all well and good, and I appreciate that. And this is where I turn to Mr. Hamill-Smith, for this. How is it now? Because all that sounds good. How is it now that you generate that party and you show younger individuals this is the way? Because yes, you need to try and stop this brain drain, for one, which is going to be extremely difficult. Two, you need younger people to get more involved. You need younger people to have a voice of their own. And three, it's very hard to teach old dogs new tricks, as they say. So you have an older voting population which still has an influence on the household as to, I'm aligning myself with this party, you have to vote for this party no matter what. How is it that you bring people towards that party?
So, in fact, what you really need to look at, if you wonder if in fact there's a hope that Mr. Alvarez talked about, is how did Eric Williams start? Educating the people. That's what Woodford Square became, the University of Woodford Square.
Yes.
People were willing to listen. So there comes a point in time when the nation says enough is enough. We just go, such a mass of people are saying, this isn't working, we need something new. And when they reach that point, they say, well, let's look out there, let's listen. And that's what, if you moved into that sphere that Eric Williams did, because he didn't start, we think that there was a huge organization called the PNM. The number of seats won, in the first elections, pre-independence, 5 or 6 seats. And of course, he managed to combine with others and build a party. They were really a coalition, by the way, within the PNM. They remained in the institution thereafter, but it's built on varied numbers of different people from different strains, as it were, that had different issues. And education, and what you guys are really doing is education, by the way. We don't have to go into Woodford Square to reach people nowadays. Mm-hmm. We come to the TV station, and that reaches out to a mass of people. We use social media, and there will come a point in time when people will open their eyes to something new. When what they say, when the people are ready, the master will arrive. Is that the saying?
Yes.
So in a sense, the public, you are right. The public have to be ready to accept something new, and it will arrive because they will open their eyes and their ears to see and to learn, and somebody will emerge willing to provide something of a vision which takes them in a different direction.
Well, I mean, I hear both of y'all, and I agree with y'all, but I have a fear that might kind of erode the foundation of this process, which this is probably the end point. But before we could get there, my fear is that this ever-growing dependency that we have, the lack of a middle class, and now the government handouts and the housing and the grants, it has influenced our culture as the middle class shrunk. So the culture now is now more of dependency, but also of distraction, right? As the unfortunate turn of events, what was our great soca song we jam and still is now like the rallying cry of when things go wrong, but we seem to be ignoring the problems. Because the lack of vision, the lack of patriotism, Ms. Alvarez, that you keep pointing out, and Keaton implied it in the citizens, could it be that we're just so caught up in the short term that we don't really, as a society, care or consider the long term? And the politicians see that and they understand that, so they make use of that. But it's not necessarily them who started the lack of long-term vision. They're playing into people just, hey, I want to go to the next fete. I want to, what about next year carnival? You know, where am I traveling next year for my summer vacation, as opposed to what development am I seeing? Because it takes a price, right? For capital expenditure, you have to cut out these social programs. And to me, I don't know if enough of our population is willing to pay the short-term price for a long-term gain that they might not actually realize in their lifetimes the longer the situation devolves.
But Sim just hit the point when he said, when the people are ready. I'm telling you right now, the people are ready. Because the average citizen today must have a little cell phone. The cell phone cost per week is somewhere around $300 a week. They must have internet at their house. And there's a lot of new expenses that they must have. And then now you have increase in gas and so on. So, and the income hasn't increased. Mm-hmm. So now you have, as a result of that, you have a lot of increased crime in our society because they want to go to the next fete, like you say, and they want that, and where's the money coming from? So the society is degenerating into one of hopelessness. Mm. And when you start talking to the average citizen and they can identify with your vision and recognize that there's so much potential for development and good. And I'm telling you, Trinidad and Tobago is one of the most fortunate countries in the Caribbean. We have some of the best tourism sites in the world. Yesterday, in today's paper, I was reading about National Geographic making a tour of Trinidad and Tobago and saying, and the people were alarmed, wow, you have this, wow, you have that, wow, you know? And that's just the tip of the iceberg. What you talk about down the islands and so on, I mean, there's so much potential for economic growth and development that all you need really is someone to say, listen guys, we have the potential, we have the personnel, and we have the finance. All we need is the management. And that management cannot come from one man saying, I can do it. It has to come from all of us, all these wonderful... When I sit here on the morning with you guys, you all are an example of the intelligent young people that we have in the society. You guys sit down and people, before WESN, nobody even knew there was a Keaton Shaw. Nobody knew that you existed. I remember saying with my daughter at Love Movement. Yeah. You understand? And now you're sitting here and recognizing, wait a minute, these are some really intelligent young people who has a vision for tomorrow. And there are lots of other people like you throughout Trinidad and Tobago. They have to wake up. And they have to say, and you guys are making a tremendous contribution through media by saying, let's bring this thing to the fore. And let's talk to people about it. Not just talk around it. Let's deal with these issues. Mm-hmm. And let's provide solutions so that there can be hope for tomorrow. And that's where the solutions will come from.
Well, as flattering as that may be, Mr. Alvarez.
It will get you everywhere, just so you know. It will get you everywhere. You could come on anytime and flatter us.
As we break for WSN's News on the Hour, I leave you with this. Yes, the people are ready. I agree with both you gentlemen on that. My skepticism lies in whether or not they're willing. Being ready is one thing. Willing is a completely different story, which we could expand on after WSN's News on the Hour. We'll be right back after this.
Here's your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise St. Clair. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Tobago taxi drivers in talks to raise fares. 9-month-old baby killed by female relative lead to arrest. Venezuelans intercepted. Firearm, ammunition, alcohol seized. And internationally, Kabul blast kills teenagers sitting practice exams. Now for the details. Tobago taxi drivers are contemplating raising their fares. This comes just days after Finance Minister Colin Burt announced a hike in fuel costs in the 2022-2023 budget.
We had a meeting this morning and we are going to meet on Friday again to discuss this whole fuel hike. It's very heart-rending. It's not an easy thing because the government will raise fuel but maybe about 5 times and maxi fares remain the same. So we're going to discuss it and then we will let the public know exactly.
Relatives and friends of 9-month-old baby Celine gathered yesterday to bid her a final farewell following her untimely passing. The baby was fed a poisonous substance via a syringe by a close female relative last week. The woman is currently detained in connection to the crime.
Let the relative department do their investigation and let justice be served. Whether it be she needs mental treatment, whether it be she have to serve her time, let justice be served.
Officers of the Southwestern Division intercepted 4 illegal immigrants and seized a quantity of illegal items during an anti-crime exercise conducted in the division on Wednesday. Based on information received, the officers proceeded to School Road, Santa Flora, in the vicinity of Mahawal Beach, where 4 Venezuelan migrants were intercepted. When the officers searched the suspects, they discovered 1 Beretta pistol, 2 rounds of 9mm ammunition, and 20 cases of alcohol. The suspects were detained and the illegal firearm, ammunition, and alcohol seized. In international news now, a suicide attack at a tuition center in the Afghan capital, Kabul, has killed at least 19 people, most of them female students. Nearly 30 others were wounded at the Kaj Education Center area in the west of the city. Students had been sitting a practice university exam when the bomber struck. No group has yet claimed the attack. Many of those in the area are minority Hazaras who have often been targeted by Islamic State militants. Well, that was News to the Hour on WESN. I am Denise St. Clair. Thanks for watching.
Come travel with us as we explore Diwali across the globe. Diwali is celebrated in many countries worldwide, but do you know the traditions and practices of each nation? From Guyana to Australia, WESN presents Diwali Passport, October 3rd to October 23rd, with replays on October 24th. It's Diwali Passport, a WESN exclusive.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
I think this is the kind of conversation that we need more often on national platforms rather than individuals going for the jugulars of other individuals. You see, this is meaningful conversation which can lead to change, but again, it's whether or not the people are ready, but are they willing? And before we do open up the phone lines this morning, because we welcome your calls, Mr. Hammersmith, you made a very valuable point on air. which I think needs to be heard publicly, is that at times we have to descend to a state of chaos before people actually open their eyes. And yes, okay, fine, we're ready right now, we need fresh new minds, we need a breath of fresh air, but not yet. Let's just hold on a little bit longer. I think,
and that's the real danger. People become apathetic. They think there is no hope on the horizon, and they allow it to just, the moment to reach when people just revolt. That's ultimately what happens. It would be a rare, because if you reach that point, it's even harder to come back. You need to open your eyes now whilst things are starting to fall away, to say, look, we need people with a new vision. We need people who can implement. We need people who have thought about how do we, the guns, we were just talking about guns, because that's what underpins a revolution. And I mean, we look back at 1990, that's child's play to what the potential is in terms of the number of guns that are in this country. But where are the guns coming from? We don't make them. What do we do to stop the guns coming into Trinidad and Tobago? You look back and you will see that Mr. Pandey had talked about a ship rider agreement. I don't care, you know, Paula Gopi School was here, and we say, oh, we brought in the OPV and whatever. That was not going to do nothing, zero. Yes, it allowed an opportunity to spend a lot of money, and one does, you know, one wonders what comes along with a lot of money. That's why we have contracts and we cut ribbons and stuff like that. But maintenance is not something we do. We're not into that because there's no ribbons, there's no glory for the politician in maintenance. And so all the boats are stuck down in the Coast Guard and they can't work. We don't have fuel to let them. We don't have money, we don't have fuel to give the Coast Guard to manage these problems. But the truth is, when Mr. Pandey said, look, we're going to introduce a ship rider agreement because we don't have the resources to competently stop these guns coming. And imagine the situation was mild. That's back in the 1995, 97 sort of period compared to what we see today. I mean, back then we had, what, 100 murders were considered a lot.
Yes.
We reached 600. And he said, when people said, oh, we lose our sovereignty, he said, well, you know, you have a choice. You could consider what you have now as sovereignty, or your overlord can now be the drug lord. And that's exactly what happened. And the only way, to my mind, that we will really get a handle on this is, in fact, if we introduce international assistance in the terms of a ship rider agreement. Barbados has it, Jamaica have it. Have they lost their sovereignty?
No.
But you're in a small country. You can't further isolate yourself. There are some things on which you need help.
Well, gentlemen, the opportunity to spend a lot of money and cut a ribbon. That's a powerful statement. Think about it. It's a very, very powerful statement. But let's open up the phone lines now and let's hear from the public, because that's what we encourage, and the interaction is necessary, I believe so. The phone lines are open, the numbers on your screen, and we already have a call on the line with us from Pity Valley. Good morning, caller. Hello, good morning.
Morning, you're on the air.
Caller, you're going to have to turn on the volume on your television.
Good morning, Sean Caton, and your guest there.
Hi, good morning.
Yeah, I would like to ask a couple. It's down.
There's a repeat.
I would like to ask a couple questions of your guest there this morning.
Sure.
One, with concerning the 4%. Will your guest agree that if the minister numbers is right, and he said if he has to pay the 4%, he has to force and find that money, and if he follows the unions, bargaining what the unions want, 16% and up, to pay everyone and the back pay will cost the government, the state, $15 billion. What that will do is crush the economy and the private sector. So that's one question. Number two, the gas do people know in Trinidad and Tobago the government still subsidize gas? And how long do we want to stay subsidizing gas till we know for it? And some other couple questions I have to ask about, they say we have no middle class and stuff like that. I want to know where this money is coming from that are laying out here, where people are getting these money from. If you show up at the sea or airport on a Friday to go to Tobago, you cannot get no flights. Flights are all booked. And for some...
I think we lost the call.
Call, we apologize. I'm not sure what happened there.
Yeah, that was...
gentlemen, do we have another call on the line? All right, okay. Gentlemen, bear in mind those two questions. We just have to take this call from Shigones. Good morning, caller.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I just want to pose an issue for your panelists this morning.
Sure.
I'll especially be interested in hearing from Mr. Hamill to Mr. Alvarez.
Uh-huh.
The thing is, we keep talking about this agriculture and food security and billions of dollars and hundreds of millions of dollars and tons of food and ferry service and all kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But not many people on the policy side seem to be interested in the fact that first and foremost, we must feed our people good quality food. Food which is not only safe for consumption, but could provide the nutrition that we need as a society to have a good working population and a healthy population.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well,
let me start with the young man from Pity Valley who seemed to think that he talked about the 16% of where we're going to find the $15 billion for the to pay these public servants, and then he talked about also the middle class,
yes,
and so on. I think that they're missing the major point. Nobody can sit down and say that it should be 4% or 5% or 6% or whatever percent. There has to be, no politician worth his salt is going to say that's what it's supposed to be. There's collective bargaining, and the collective bargaining process will determine what that figure is. And that all we're saying is that if you're going to say on one hand that you have an increase of 34%, and then you're saying all you can afford, and this is so disastrous, that if we were to pay you more than 4%, the whole economy will collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Then to me, the figures don't add up. But that is something that the trade unions have to deal with. And the trade unions who are negotiating with the government will have to arrive at what that is. The other thing, when he talked about the middle class and how whether you fund, you see, you have to change your vision from government paying the people and government building the middle class and government doing this to free up the economy so that the people, that started by saying about the young people and the intelligence that we have in our community, it is the people of Trinidad and Tobago that will determine what that future is and what that path is. It can't be the politician.
I just want to add to that. I think, Mr. Pettivali, it's not that Mr. Alvarez was saying this is causing the death of the middle class. It's two separate things. This is just the latest whatever issue that we have to deal with. But the death of the middle class, I think we would all agree, was something that happened over a long period of time, over multiple administrations. I would argue that it is just the evolution of how the politicians made decisions to get elected, which I think goes back to the lack of vision.
I think it came more or less because of the dependence on government.
And right, exactly.
Mr. Amel-Smith, sorry, do you want to answer the question from the caller? He said he'd like to hear from you in particular in relation to
the Pity Valley thing. Where do we get the money for the 4%? Where's this cost coming from? To my mind, what people haven't addressed, and what you would think unions and the government would address, is what are we getting for our 4%? I want performance. Nobody in this country says that the civil service performs. Maybe at some level there's performance, but our performance is absolutely dismal. So you want more pay, I want performance. Let's put that on the table. What my approach to it is, you know what, I don't have a problem with the 4% or the 16%. I say to you, look, you have a certain base pay now, you want to reach to X, let's have pay for performance. Let's also have pay at risk, because the two things work together. These are the outcomes that I want to achieve. I want, just to call something simple, I want passports to be delivered within 2 hours, not 2 months. I want the customs service to pass my customs declaration in 15 minutes, not in 23 days. Because that's what happened. Imagine for a moment the amount of productivity that you will achieve in this country. Because people don't realize time is money. So if I take 3 weeks to clear my goods on the port, where I could have done it in 15 minutes, then there's a huge cost to that. And of course it's passed on, and we complain about the rise in prices, but our lack of performance is a component of those high prices. It's not just what we're importing.
Well,
and it's time to us change the dynamics of this altogether.
I like the way you're thinking. We have a caller on the line with us from Shogunas. Good morning, caller. Good morning.
One thing is obvious. Your guests don't watch your program, and you haven't briefed them on my suggestions for the problem.
Well, you can brief them as well.
I stated that crime is not an original problem in Trinidad. It is the result of our major problem, which is a breakdown in law and order. In any country, you get order by enforcing your laws. In Trinidad, where we had one of the best system of governance at independence, the cabinet did this by having a minister in each ministry to see that the ministry enforced their laws. And they will send up reports to the permanent secretary, which the minister saw. The annual administrative report will detail all this. 8 years ago, Dr. Rowley chastised the outgoing government, Mrs. Bissessa, for being 4 years behind an administrative report. That is impossible. How could you make a budget without the administrative report? Because that is what quantifies expenditure and revenue. Now he is 7 to 8 years behind in administrative reports. And that, gentlemen, is the root cause of the problem. If we sit down and enforce all our laws through our ministers, put up the reports in Parliament, because these things are supposed to be in the library in Parliament, make it available to people, you will solve all these problems. Not only crime, the flooding you have all over the place, the traffic jam you have all over the place, the lateness in having leases we've used. One of them I have listed to you on many occasions. Any questions from you or your guests, gentlemen?
I don't think so, Professor. But I will tell you, I don't think any one of us on this panel will dispute that the breakdown in law and order. No. I don't think you will dispute that the breakdown of law and order.
I was looking for Mr. Alvarez to put the question I asked the last time he was there. Look him there. Go down.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor.
I do not recall the last question, but we have a caller on the line with us from San Fernando.
That man remembers things too well.
Good morning. No, that's good actually. That's good. Good morning, caller from San Fernando.
Morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Just to add on what Mr. Ahmed Smith was saying, he's right in relation to having things done in 15 minutes or maybe 2 hours or whatever have you. But then he has to understand that he's interfering with the corruption dollars. because customs always tell you have to pay overtime for something that they can do in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
We agree with that. But who wants to bell the cat? Because at the end of the day, when we're in opposition, we say all kind of things, but we'll do this and we'll do that. And when we get in office, the problem is that we forget what we promised the people. Secondly, you're talking about the crime situation. You're talking about the police. The first thing the police service is supposed to do is look at the recruiting, because we're recruiting bandits. If we stop recruiting bandits, you will not have use for the PSB, Professional Standard Bureau in the police service, because there's a situation where three guys went into the police service at the barracks, and they went on leave on the weekend pass, and they didn't come back. And nobody could find them, only to know that they were locked up in the Aruka police station because there were outstanding warrants for them over years, and somebody or family member maybe were hiding them or shading them, and then that was unearthed. So what I'm saying is that when you see police officers come on the other programs and they talk about we're trying to clean this out, it starts at the beginning. We need to look at the recruiting. Coming back to Mr. Mr. Alvarez.
Call up very quickly.
We have a situation where he talked about agriculture and the produce and whatever, but if he remembered, you all might remember, Keaton and Small, you all might remember, but the point is, you had agricultural officers who used to be going out in the fields with farmers and ensuring that their crops are up to par. But we don't have that anymore. No agricultural officer want to go on the road.
And I think that ties into your point, ties into what they call the second caller from Shagonas was, the first caller from Shagonas was stating in relation to policymakers, agriculture, ensuring that our food is nutritious and safe for consumption. Yeah. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Sorry, caller, but we do.
Yeah, we have another caller online with us from San Fernando, actually. Good morning, caller.
Hey, morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Alvarez, Mr. Hamilton.
Morning, good morning.
Mr. Alvarez, you stated, tell me if I'm wrong, that you did not see nominal, the increase in nominal GDP not translated into growth within the middle class, right? Now, what I have to say about that is, that growth in nominal GDP is very visible within the population. All those subsidies that the government has placed, has continued to let the population enjoy, a lot of that money goes there. Then you have, as Mr. Hamilton stated, you have non-performing public service, state enterprise, as well as statutory authorities. That is another place where some of that money goes because of the inefficiency of those things. And we have to pay those people, the inefficient, the overstaffed, because if they were efficient, the staffing will be low, we have a lower cost. However, a lot of that, where you could see the visible increase is in the upper echelons of the society, what they call I would call the upper 10%. That is where you see growth within the economy, and unfortunately, that is where the performance is. Because if you listen to the finance minister's report, and you look at the numbers, our earnings for the non-oil sector, our taxes on the non-oil sector that they collected, that is performing. Manufacturing and all those other things. So we have to fix that area, Mr. Alvarez. The civil service, those other enterprises, and we have to wean the population off of those subsidies. If you want to see growth, that's just a fact. That is just how it is. Sorry to say that, but that is just how it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to Mr. I want to give the very final call for this morning because I'd like to give them the opportunity to respond to everything. Caller on the line with us from Digo Martin. Good morning, caller.
Thank you, Keaton and Sean. I have to talk real fast. Mr. Alvarez, the brain drain is talked about a lot on this show, and can you please just add industrial designers to your list of engineers and architects? They too need jobs. Mr. Hammersmith, I usually concur with everything you say, and I love your acronym, CYA. I'm going to steal it. Guys, climate change. Sean, I'll just continue about Ian a little bit. As a member of SID, Small Island Developing States, this government should be quivering like in Tuvalu and Solomon Islands, because we know that the areas most impacted are agriculture, but we have none of that, so they don't have to worry. Health, that's a joke. They don't have to worry about that too. Coastal erosion, Cedrus, Ecocus, Blanchishes, Manzanilla, Guayari, Seawall, all eroded. But Carl Mimbe has the nerve to talk about his 7 green initiatives. If you just take one of those, the first one, farmers getting a $25,000 rebate for using renewable energy. I mean, seriously, the farmers who are attacked daily for their workers and their cars, the same ones who are waiting 30 years for land tenure. The crops are stolen while the police wait for technology. So what they're going to do with solar technology? Give me a break. One thing on the corruption, I'm pleased about the creation of the new IACC. Mr. Hammersmith will know about this. He's the expert on that. The International Anti-Corruption Court. Guys, that's like the ICC, the criminal court. This strengthens the enforcement of the criminal laws against corrupt leaders, because each year billions of dollars are stolen from communities and countries around the world, and it should be going to basic amenities. And by the way, this country was part of that with the involvement of a very good friend of mine, an esteemed judge. I can't say her name. Thanks. Goodbye. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you.
I'll just say it again. And I think with the upper 10% seeing the growth, well, that's where the brains are going, because they want to get rewarded for their efforts. They don't go into politics on public service. That's for the people whose ambitions exceeds their capabilities. That's, to me, what I think. So we need to do a better job of getting the right people in the right positions.
And very quickly, fun fact, you mentioned the ICC. I don't think people in Trinidad and Tobago know that Trinidad and Tobago, under the leadership of A.N.R. Robinson, played an instrumental role in the formation of the International Criminal Court, the ICC. It's just a fun fact. But gentlemen,
so much to say, and we have very little time.
I'd say we have about 3 minutes left. I'll give you a minute each.
Okay, so I would love to have answered all of those things. But what is clear from the questions that came up is that there's definitely, everyone is pointing to the same thing, you know. There's an absence of planning. There's an absence of where we go from here. So we're talking about all these issues, whether it's the economy, whether we could pay the wages, whether we're dealing with corruption, whether we're dealing with the environmental concerns that we have. And everyone is saying, but look, they can point to so many of these things and say, but somebody can talk about a solution. And the solution has to come from a strategic approach to what Trinidad and Tobago is going to look like 10, 15 years from now. What can we do to encourage our best minds to participate in this growth and development? That is what matters. And that's how we have to find hope for a better tomorrow. We have to get the people participation in this vision. I know a lot of people say Alvarez and Tim, and they look and say, what are your solutions? But the solutions can't come from Steve Alvarez and from Tim. It has to come from all of us. And the best answers, the best solutions, the best way forward is if we, and Keaton, you talked about that. Yes, we are ready, but are we willing to participate? And that is where the next step is. You have to be willing to come forward and say, I want to do something. I have an idea in my head. So Mr. Shaguanas and Diwali and so on, and all these ideas and so on. It's good enough to call a station and talk about it, but are you willing to take the next step and say, let me participate in this rebuilding process? And that's what we need.
Certainly. Well, Mr. Hammersmith, your closing remarks, sir.
All right. So one caller talked about law and order diminishing, and that's why we have crime. But you know, there's another, besides we jamming still, we had something called We Like It So, you know what I mean? So the fact is that that's where education comes in. In our schools, we need character education. And what we need to focus on was what Dr. Eric Williams told us about productivity and discipline, Kaylee, because that changes the culture. And really, it is in the schools that you start to build that. It may take a generation, but you have to start somewhere. Somebody asked, who's going to bell the cat? Well, the cat is not going to get belled until the cat got caught in a trap. And that's where we're heading. That's where we're heading. I know they say we're recruiting bandits in the police service. We should be doing like they do in the army. You can join as a career officer because that's what you want your domain to be. How can you possibly think that the courier in every generation is going to become the CEO of a corporation? So if you have to be a constable in the beat to become the commissioner of police, every time, every generation. It may happen, it's great when it does happen, but you need to bring in people at the career officer level. And we talked about the International Corruption Court and the question of nominal GDP and overstaffing, and really that is part of it. You can't imagine that when you overstaff, you get less productivity. When you overstaff, you become less safe because everybody's leaving it to somebody else.
Yes.
And once we change that, and culture can be changed. I can tell you that Trinidadians, we feel, oh, we like it so, we don't care about safety. But the truth is, if you had leadership, you can make a start, and within 3 years, you could change the dynamics and the culture. We have to start somewhere. You have to start with who?
Well,
I mean, I'll just like to close off with I think a key thing now Mr. Alvarez pointed out, dependency, right? It's something that we might take for granted, and we've heard of the concept before, but I think we don't consider it enough. How much of our population are too dependent on politicians? The problem is, politicians, they will not last forever, but dependency could last forever.
Yes. Well, as I close, who's going to bell the cat? I haven't heard that term in quite some time.
I don't know if I've ever heard that term.
But also, just a public service announcement to all our politicians out there. The police service is recruiting, so feel free to go anytime, since, you know,
that's where the bandits go.
That's where the bandits go. Anyway, folks, I want to thank very much Mr. Steve Alvarez and Mr. Amlo Smith for making the time this morning to join us on the program, gentlemen. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to continued conversation in the future. And I will just wrap things up by saying, where there's despair, hope. Anyway, folks, that's it. Remember, today's a good day to have a great Friday and a great weekend ahead. I'm Keaton Shaw. This is Talking Point. This is WESN, the Content Capital. We'll see you on Monday. Bye-bye.